Hi, bitch besties. It's your main bitch, Melly. Thank you so much for tuning in and welcome to another episode of the Judgy Bitch Pod. Hi, bitch besties. Welcome to a new episode of On the Page of Crime and welcome my co-host, Paige.
Hi.
Hi. I was just mentioning it to you. My building has a pool party right now. That's why I'm, dressed like I'm coming from a pool party because I'm coming from a pool party. And they gave out high noons. So I'm drinking over here high noons, having hot flashes from it because I haven't had alcohol in a while. And now we're completely shifting gears into such a serious topic that makes me sick to my stomach. But I'm
Yeah,
ready. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Before we start, I want to share a disclaimer because with our last episodes about the Lacey Peterson case, I did receive some comments on Spotify specifically, but also on TikTok, which is normal. And I welcome any comments, as long as they are nice and genuine and, not aggressive or going into like the personal area. I welcome any comments. I'm open for any discussion. Give it to me. However, with the last episodes, I think if you wanted to play a drinking game, you could have had a shot every time I say Netflix or Hulu documentary. So people came at me in the comments and talking about the court documents and this and that. And my response was always, thank you so much for adding to the conversation. I appreciate that. However, I think I mentioned about 100 times in the episode that all of our information is based on the Netflix and Hulu documentary. So that's why I want to put out this disclaimer right now. This episode right now is based on the documentary that you can find on YouTube and on Amazon Prime and a little bit of internet research. Bitch besties, I don't have time to read no court documents or whatever documents or, spend my day on the internet finding whatever little niche information you may have heard somewhere else. I have a full-time job. This is just my side gig. I don't make money with this. Nobody pays me for this. This is my hobby. Paige and I, we like to give our opinions and discuss these kind of cases. So don't come at me with some bullshit because I'm warning you right now. The information we're sharing is mainly from the documentary that's available on Amazon Prime. Okay? So I just wanted to make that clear.
Wait, I didn't know. I didn't even know Spotify had um a comment section.
Yeah, on Spotify, there's a comment section and people
Oh,
comment it.
I'll have to look at that. Oh man, I hope no one's like talking shit about me. No, I do see the comments on TikTok and I feel like they're more so it wasn't with the Scott Peterson case, but it was more so the Karen Reed case. We really got it given to us. And I'm
Yeah.
like, Uh, s people were saying, like, "You guys have no idea what you're talking about." I'm like, "Me? That's all I ever talk about is true crime." Like, it's my whole personality. I think I know a little bit. Like,
Right.
okay.
And I don't mind a discussion in the comments. I welcome a discussion in the comments. We don't all have to be the same opinion. We can have different opinions and talk about it as long as it's in
Right.
a nice way. Don't come at
Yeah.
me personally or be nasty on my page and my comments like, fuck off, get out.
Right. Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know?
Be respectful.
Yeah.
But it's the internet. Everyone's, keyboard warriors, like, they're gonna come at you, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah,
Whatever.
exactly. And I want to give another disclaimer. Everything we say is, of course, allegedly. We don't know shit. We're no professionals, as mentioned.
Don't come for us.
Yeah, everything is allegedly. Yep. And with that being said, I have an intro into this episode because we need to shift gears. I need to come away from my pool party vibe, from us laughing about it, because this case is really sickening. It's devastating. It's frustrating. It's all of the above. And let me read the intro real quick. So today on the Page of Crime, we're talking about a case that still leaves more questions than answers. Kendrick Johnson, a 17-year-old high schooler found dead inside a rolled up gym mat at his high school. Authorities ruled it an accident, but his family and a lot of the public aren't buying it. Missing organs, conflicting reports, and allegations of a cover up. What really happened to Kendrick Johnson? Well, buckle up, bitch besties, because Paige and I, we're going to discuss it all. Welcome to a new episode of On the Page of Crime. I love when David writes
That
me
was
cute
good.
little intros.
Yeah, I was like, "That's good." You
Right.
sounded so smart.
As I said, this case is just sickening. I thank you, Paige, for suggesting it. Paige suggested, our next episode to make it this case. And I watched the documentary yesterday and started to prepare for us today. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I just couldn't believe my ears. I couldn't believe that this is America. I couldn't believe this is actually happening. And it's still happening. It's still ongoing. Although
Mhm.
this was 2013, there is still no justice in this case. But what was it, Paige, that drew you to the case? Why did you suggest it?
So I heard about this a few years ago. Um, I believe it was a morbid podcast. And it's funny, like my sister, my cousin, and I all fell like really invested into this case. I don't know if it's because of like him and I being the same age and just, kind of putting myself in his shoes or like his classmates' shoes. Um, and just the devastation of the whole entire case and, the outcome still being unknown and his family not getting any justice. Um, yeah, it's like I was telling you earlier, I was like, I don't know if I can discuss this case without like getting teary eyed because it literally just it breaks my heart.
Yeah, it does. It really does. Yeah. And bitch besties, if you ever want to suggest a case you want Paige and I to talk about, please slide in our comments. You're welcome there. Let us know. We're
Be
happy
nice.
to look into anything, watch any documentaries, and then, compile a case for you guys. So, yeah, let us know. But in this case, what happened was on January 10, 2013, Kendrick didn't come home and was even missing for his fourth period in school. So he went missing in school. Um, his body was then found the next day, rolled upside down in a gym mat at 10:30 a.m. In the gym of the Lowndes, am I saying that right? Lowndes High School in Valdesta, Georgia. That's in the south of Georgia. We should also mention that Kendrick was a black kid in the south of Georgia, very close to the border of the panhandle of Florida. His legs and feet were sticking out of the mat. He was hanging upside down with his head first. There was blood under his head. He was only wearing socks, and a pair of sneakers was by his feet, so on the top of the mat. They tried to identify him by showing his sister a shoe, one sneaker. That's what was said in the documentary. And that's where my disbelief started to happen. I'm like, what?
Mhm.
But that's like the smallest little part of the entire case. The day off, the sheriff told Kendrick's mother that they didn't find any foul play. The day off, they just found this kid dead, hanging in the mat, head first, blood under his head, shoes on top of him, and they say there's no foul play. So that's where it all started, pretty much, right? Meanwhile, the school went on like nothing ever happened. The documentary is built in a way where it keeps showing tidbits from news outlets at that time, news reporting about this case. And in an interview, a lieutenant from the sheriff's office stated that they assume he either fell off the gym mats or reached inside to get a shoe and he got stuck. He also says from the evidence they found, it's not a murder. But then they have a phone interview with the sheriff who states they need to wait for the autopsy results before coming to a conclusion. Finally, somebody with two brain cells. But that's already bizarre, in my opinion. And then it was also said that Kendrick was 5'10". The gym mats are 6 feet. However, according to the police, the mat hole, when you roll them up, the hole in the middle had a diameter of 14 inches, but Kendrick's shoulders were 19 inches wide. So everything they're saying already doesn't make sense. Like, how would he even
Right.
fit in that hole to reach for a fallen shoe?
Right.
But the sheriff office is still saying that he somehow made himself fit into the mat to retrieve a fallen shoe. There was also a pool of blood under his head, as I mentioned, when they removed the mat. But somehow, the shoe in question that they claim he was going for doesn't even have one splatter of blood on it.
Right.
His parents demand to identify the body, but when his father went to the morgue, he noticed cool and warm air coming out. That was said in the documentary. That is so strange. What is that alluding to? I don't even understand that comment.
Yeah, I don't know.
That was weird, but the whole thing is weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they show a picture of Kendrick's dead face and the position he was in with his arm like around his head, like laying there. And his face, to me, showed very clear signs of him being beaten up. It was all swollen. His eyes were injured. It was swollen. Like, I looked at the picture and they didn't even have to say anything. And I said, oh, he was beaten up. And then they released the images to the public, and his mom made sure of it, that the public sees them to show them that there was foul play and not like the child's office said that it was an accident. And then the documentary goes on about the history, which I wasn't as aware of. I'm still learning about all of this. And they went into the Emmett Till's case just as a reminder, but what should Black people had to endure in this country and still have to go through in this
And I was gonna
country.
say, and still have to deal with.
I'm sorry?
And still have to deal with today in
And
2026.
yeah, still have to deal with. But they, in the documentary, they show a lot of history about Black people being lynched and how lots of cover up was happening because a lot of white people lynched those Black people. And it is specifically relevant because it was in that region in the south of Georgia, you know? So that's why in the documentary, they go on this little sidetrack just to put this all into context that although they're saying this happened years ago, but this case, I mean, sorry to say, but it seems like it's still going on,
Yep.
you know? So that's why it was very important to Kendrick's parents to show his dead face and to show the world that there was foul play involved and stop this cover up, you know? So I applaud the parents actually for their courage and for their strength in doing that. And then mind you, again, as we just said, this is in Valdosta. Am I saying that right? Valdosta?
I
In
don't
the
know.
very south of Georgia, near the panhandle of Florida. And, you know, Florida, I mean, I hate to say it, but there's still Confederate flags flying to this day, right? So there is still a lot
A
of,
lot of down south.
yeah.
Mm.
So the documentary also talks about other barbaric stories, what happened to Black people in the past in this region, to put this all into context. And they also mentioned the KKK activities in Valdosta. So I was watching this documentary. Of course, I've heard of the KKK and I've heard of racism and all this, but I'm still learning about this. I was literally sick to my stomach. Like I was
Mm.
shaking my head is not even a strong enough word to
I
describe
know.
how I felt.
It's sickening. Truly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is the case. He was found, you know, there's already cover up happening from the first minute, and it just continues through the case. Let's talk about the autopsy a little bit. So an autopsy by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the JBI, stated that Kendrick Johnson had died from positional asphyxia, and the case was ruled an accidental death by the Lowndes County investigators. And accidents are not being investigated. So this poor family had to put on a full-blown protest to get this case investigated. They even blocked the courthouse at some point, running chances to get arrested themselves for it just to get heard and make some public waves. The dad says in an interview in the documentary what everyone else, I believe, is thinking by that point already. There's a major cover-up happening. And remind you, this was in 2013, way before the Black Lives Matter movement, but KJ's family put on a fight and gained national attention with that. Good for them. They ended up hiring an independent autopsy that was then conducted by William Anderson with the forensic dimensions in Heathrow, Florida on June 15, 2013. So that was half a year after he was found. They finally get an independent autopsy. So the body was already buried. So they had to exhume the body to finally get an independent autopsy. Anderson, who did the autopsy, claimed his findings indicated traces of blunt force trauma to the right neck and soft tissues and suggested the death was not accidental. Well, duh, right? Like we knew that. The independent autopsy found that Kendrick's body had been stuffed with newspapers. So somewhere in the process, the funeral home that processed the body following the FBI's autopsy stated that they never received Johnson's internal organs from the corona. The organs were said to have been destroyed through natural process and discarded by the prosecutor before the body was sent back to Valdosta, according to the funeral homeowner. Like what?
Yeah. That yeah. It so you have to give consent in order to have the organs removed. So the fact that the funeral home received his body without the organs, that's why they used the newspaper. But it's like, who gave the consent? Where did they go? Why didn't you include that in the body?
I've never thought about it, right? I know autopsy and I know they look at everything and they probably take out the organs to look at them. I never thought about what happens to the organs, right? But I for sure
Yeah.
would have never assumed that they stuff a body with newspaper. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
So I was listening to a podcast and they kind of like went into it. So the funeral home actually offered to do the services for free, and they think because obviously they didn't have the organs that they needed to, you know, fill the body to make it like look naturally like laid and stuff. Um because obviously if you don't have organs in your body doesn't sit normally. Like your organs are there for a
Yeah,
reason. So in order to like fill his body, that's why they used the newspaper. They used to do that years ago. So they think because they were offering to do it for free that they probably did the cheaper route. So that's why they use the newspapers.
that's crazy. I read that too, that they also claim that, sometimes they use cotton or sawdust, and in this case, they use newspaper. However, the Johnson family filed a complaint with a regulatory body against the funeral home operator, and a subsequent investigation by the Georgia Secretary of State's office found that the funeral home did not follow best practice and that other material was more acceptable than newspaper. Nonetheless, the investigation cleared the funeral home of any wrongdoing. The Johnson family subsequently filed a civil lawsuit against the funeral home seeking monetary damages.
Yeah,
Insane.
I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then let's get back to the school. Let's talk about the surveillance tape for a second. So in November 2013, so remind you the murder, I call it the murder because it was a murder for me, happened in January. So now we're in November. 290 hours of surveillance tape from 35 cameras that covered the gym area were released to CNN following a court request. A forensic analyst enlisted by CNN found that tapes from 2 cameras were missing an hour and 5 minutes of footage. An hour and 5 minutes of footage. While another set was missing 2 hours and 10 minutes of footage. Attorneys for the Johnson family expressed fears that the camera footage was edited as part of a cover.
Like obviously. How do you explain that? How do you explain an hour and 5 minutes just gone? I get there's glitches, like, shit happens, it's 2026 and shit still goes wrong. We still have glitches and all that. And I get that was 2013, whatever. But how does an hour and 5 minutes go missing?
On
Make that
several
make
cameras. I understand if one camera has
right.
a glitch, or if there's a power outage, all cameras have the same time frame glitch, right? But it doesn't
Right.
make sense that different cameras have different time glitches. There's no explanation other than foul play.
Mhm. Nope. Does not
Crazy.
make sense.
So then there's a second autopsy that happens. The Johnson family requested that his body be exhumed for a second time and was granted permission by the Valdosta city officials. This was already happening in June of 2018. So we are fast forwarding 5 years here. The Kendrick Johnson's body was exhumed for a second time. These poor parents, they keep burying their child and keep having to exhume him. Like my heart breaks for them. So the second autopsy, also done by the same guy, by the way, the same independent guy, it shows also cuts on his hands, like almost like defensive wounds. And they continued the autopsy on the rest of the body and found that he had hemorrhages on his neck, which appeared that he died suddenly due to blunt force trauma to the neck, and he was already dead when he was put in the mat. So they just confirmed pretty much again the findings of the first independent autopsy.
Yeah.
I honestly, I was watching this documentary and I'm so glad you suggested this case because my jaw was on the floor. Like I couldn't
It
believe
goes
it.
hand in hand with all of our other cases that we've covered, like the cover-ups and, is there, police misconduct and stuff like that. So I figured it would be very interesting, obviously, but just the case in general, like I think, you know, it's not getting as much attention or coverage or justice. So it's like, even if we just get one more viewer, you know what I mean? One viewer to change their mind and to learn about this case, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I
And
agree with you.
I'm
Yeah,
glad that you
yeah,
watched it.
yeah. No, thank you for suggesting this. Let's talk about the possible suspects because this might bring some light for the bitch besties why all this cover up is happening. So, U.S. Attorney Michael Moore gives a TV interview and promises to investigate and follow wherever the facts lead him to solve this case. After their parents were able to make such big public waves about it, right? So finally, somebody is promising to really investigate and to get into it. So they start subpoenaing some of the students of the school. And that's when a story started circulating that KJ, that's what they call Kendrick Johnson, the victim, and the Bell brothers, who are two white boys. So the story circulated that KJ and the Bell brothers had been in a fight on a school bus. The boy Brian Bell got under KJ's skin so badly that they were fighting, and only KJ ended up in a deputy car while Brian wasn't punished at all.
Right, of course.
And there was also another issue with his brother, Brendan Bell, and also the dad, Rick Bell. And guess what? It turns out that Rick Bell, the father of those two white boys that keep making issues with Kendrick, guess what? He's an FBI agent. And that's when, for me, the dice dropped. That's when I was like, ding,
Red
ding, ding,
flag.
jackpot.
Mm-hmm.
So then it turns out that the Bell brothers, those two people who were, very suspicious already just from hearing that the father is an FBI agent and that they get away with everything, they weren't subpoenaed. They weren't interviewed.
Why?
Why? Exactly. But also it turned out that Rick Bell, the father, was talking to witnesses and appeared to have intimidated them and followed them. That tracks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So eventually his home, Rick Bell, the FBI agent, the dad of Brian and Brendan, his home was eventually raided. So there must have been some evidence for a judge to sign off on this home being raided, right? So that gave me a little hope because I didn't know where the story was going when I was watching it, right? However, both boys remain that they're innocent and nothing happened. Crazy. Let's talk Let's talk about a possible motive. So then there was an anonymous email sent that told a story about KJ having sex or a love affair, whatever, with one of the boys' girlfriend, and him and his brother waiting with knives for KJ. The names were blacked out because they were minors, but you don't have to be a genius to know that this was about Brian and Brendan. So that seems to be a motive for me. But then they found out who sent the email, and of course, interviewed this person, and then they twisted and turned it like they do in the entire case. And all of a sudden they say, well, it's all just hearsay and all speculation and it's not credible. So the motive, so to speak, is off the table.
Right.
It's insane. But there's more suspicious facts. Let's talk about those for a little bit. And please feel free to chime in if you have any more. This is just what I found, as saying it again, on the Amazon documentary and on the Wikipedia page. So the coroner, Bill Watson, was called to the scene 5 hours after the body was found. And this is supposed to happen immediately, according to Georgia law. But why 5 hours later? 5 hours.
Exactly.
And he claimed that, in his opinion, the body has been moved already and the scene has been compromised.
My thing is so the police automatically assumed that it was accidental.
Yeah,
What did you do within those 5, 6 hours before the medical examiner came?
yeah.
Like, I
Good
wanna know
question.
what was done because you weren't investigating, you didn't close off the scene. Everything was compromised because they did not close off the scene. People were walking around the scene or the area without booties on. Like, no one was wearing gloves. Nothing was contained, and I'm like, "What did you do in that time frame? If nothing, you didn't do an investigation. You immediately said that it was an accident. What was done in that 5, 6 hours?" Like, I don't, it doesn't make sense. This case, I'm telling you, like, I know I get very I'm like, my blood is boiling, I feel like,
Yeah,
because it's just so frustrating. Everything about it is just so frustrating.
it's so frustrating and it doesn't make sense. It's even
Mm-mm.
if you wanted to play devil's advocate like we did in the last episodes of the Lacey Peterson case, I can't even come up with the other side. Like
I was gonna
can't,
no,
I can't.
no, no,
I
just no.
can't even play devil's advocate because even if you think
No.
it's an accident, but still, like, why does it take you 5 hours to call the corona?
Uh, and also, like, they haven't really proved how it was technically an accident. They did no due diligence whatsoever, and they didn't prove that it was an accident. So I'm like, what did you do? Like, how did you come up with that? How did you determine that?
Yeah, crazy.
Mm,
And then there were 3 pairs of sneakers. One random pair had blood on them. That wasn't KJ's sneakers. Did they look into whose pairs of sneakers that was? No.
no, no, they didn't collect any evidence.
Crazy. There was blood on the wall, multiple splatters of visibly blood. That wasn't tested.
Mm-mm.
Eventually, I believe that was a little confusing for me, or maybe I missed it, but it sounded like eventually they tested it and found out it wasn't Kendrick's blood.
Right. So then whose blood was it?
Whose blood was it? But that to me speaks for a fight. You know, if there's somebody else's blood on the
Right.
wall, there must have been a physical fight.
Right. I agree.
Then there was a second pair of KJ's sneakers that was thrown behind him in the gym mat, as I said earlier, right? He was hanging head first, had socks on, and a pair of sneakers was on top by his feet, which also speaks for it. This couldn't have been an accident because how did the sneakers get in there?
Mm. Just nothing makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah. And then they also said that Kendrick had vomited and there was no blood or vomit on that sneaker under him.
Yeah. The fact that there was bodily fluid on the floor and then the shoe was placed on top of it, how did that happen? How did the blood and everything not touch it? Like, go around it? All of a sudden, like, parted ways. No, that was placed
Right.
purposely.
And how can you still have the theory that he climbed in there to get his shoe when the shoe has none of those bodily fluids on it?
Right.
Doesn't make sense. They also found a hoodie that was not Kendrick's, but appeared to have blood on it as well, but wasn't tested either.
Of course not.
Of course not. And then the camera footage, as we talked about, over an hour missing from all cameras. And there are 4 cameras in the gym itself. So, and they all only show Kendrick walking into the gym, but then it cuts out to minutes or even hours later, and like nothing ever happened.
Yeah. The fact that all of them, sorry, just the fact that all of the cameras cut out and we're missing just a significant time just does not make sense.
It does not make sense. And let's talk about, we have to say, the alleged cover up. Just want to
Right.
throw in this word so
Okay.
nobody
Don't
can come for
confirm.
us. It's all alleged.
Yeah.
Allegedly, it's a cover up. So let's talk about all the involved parties, because as we said, that it starts from minute 1 and it's still ongoing. So there's the
Hmm.
Lowndes High School involved. There's the superintendent's office involved. There's the GBI involved. There's the FBI involved, and even the DOJ.
Hmm.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Like it's crazy that they're all involved in a accident.
Yeah. But also, who has the power to turn all those people, like the corrupt? I don't know. I don't really know how that even happens, right? But somebody powerful must either threaten them with something or buy them all off, right? Like how, so I don't know. So even if it's the
Yeah.
father of those 2 boys, an FBI agent, what does he have so powerful against all those people working in those authorities that they all play along?
Power. That's what he has is power.
Yeah,
You know, he's top of the line. Like he has so many resources. Like yeah, I just think he has the power to do that.
yeah,
I don't think he has to have like necessarily buying people out or anything like that. I just think he actually has that power to do that.
yeah. Or he plays in the big boys club who has the power, even if it's not him personally, there's some bigger machinery behind him that has that power.
Yep.
And they allude to it in the documentary, and I'll come to it. But the cover up basically started at the beginning with the JBI agents, went to the medical examiner and all the way to the funeral home. But for what? To cover up for those 2 white boys? It's insane. So, and the US attorney that I mentioned earlier, who promised to investigate to the fullest, that was actually in October 2013, after the family raised so much public awareness and the pressure was on. Well, guess what? He suddenly resigns. So even he allegedly, need to throw in this word, was pressured, in my opinion, to resign. And he was the one who put the Bell brothers as suspects of the investigation. So that, of course, was a huge loss for the case, because he seems to be the only one really, um, how to say, in reality. Let's put it this way. So KJ's mom says in an interview in the documentary that they scared him out of his job. That's her belief. And then his successor took everything over except of this case. Of
Of
course.
course.
And this case was then moved to Ohio. Like,
Why?
why is a case from South Georgia moved to Ohio? Somebody please explain. Does it ever
I don't
happen?
know. Like
I've
that
never heard of that.
that doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
2 different states, 2 different laws. Like I just I don't understand it. What the hell?
Makes no sense. Three and a half years after he was found dead, all federal charges were dropped due to not enough evidence, but they still believe he was murdered by his schoolmates, but there just wasn't enough evidence for a federal case, but might be for a civil case. Make that make sense, please.
I know. It's similar to the OJ case where he won the criminal but lost the civil case. will never make sense to me.
Yeah, crazy. The Johnsons say the DOJ confirmed that the shoe was planted there and they just don't have enough evidence to prove it. That's also a weird statement, right? Why would they admit to it?
Hmm. Right.
What do you mean there's not enough evidence? Well, there's evidence because the shoe doesn't have any bodily fluids on it where it was found. That's
Right.
evidence. Anyway, but you just can't help but wonder what would have happened if the boys weren't the sons of an FBI agent, the suspected boys, you know?
I don't know. I mean, yes, obviously, I think that really helped them, but I think because they were white kids and KJ was black, they still probably would have gotten away with it, sadly.
Yeah, sickening. So then the
Yeah.
documentary speaks about Edgar Hoover and the racism within the FBI and how they bully people. And they showed a letter from the FBI that was sent to Martin Luther King Jr. that suggested to him to please commit suicide pretty much a month before his assassination. That's the big white flap I was referring to
Hmm.
earlier. Crazy.
Yeah.
Kendrick's dad says that the DOJ admitted to him that they have evidence for corruption pointing to Rick Bell, but they will hand it over to the FBI. And once it was handed over, Rick Bell then suddenly resigned. It's also weird, right? So far, they
Like,
seem allegedly to cover
right.
everything up on his behalf. And all of a sudden, when the pressure is on and there's evidence, they let go of him.
Can you imagine like how hard it is to get into the FBI? How hard you have to work to get into the FBI? And then allegedly your son then or sons committed a crime and then just ended your career? Because I would be pissed. Like,
Right.
is it really worth it? Like, I just, I don't, I mean, if I was in that position, absolutely not. You're my kids. I love you, but absolutely not. You committed murder. You deserved prison. You deserve prison.
Right.
I don't care. Fuck that.
That's the double standard, right? Don't you take an oath when you work for the FBI? But that doesn't
Yeah,
apply
like,
to your own children then?
right. Allegedly. This is all alleged.
Allegedly. Oh, and don't forget, there were also 7 judges recused themselves in the course of the entire case. 7 judges. I really wonder
That
what
is
they
so
had
bizarre.
against all those people. Like, what was the pressure that they get them to do that? I don't understand. Allegedly.
Insane. Allegedly.
So eventually, this case was dismissed by the DOJ, who admits that the crime scene has planted objects and that KJ was murdered, but there is just nothing else they can do about it. And of course, there was also a missing FBI report. And guess what? The missing FBI report was about the video frames from the footage, from the video surveillance footage. And they took pictures, video frames of each of the cameras and strongly redacted everything. There was nothing to see. Like you could barely even see that the picture is taken in the gym, right?
Yeah.
My understanding is that the filmmakers of this documentary, I believe it was them, they were able to remove the redaction and they showed the actual pictures underneath it. And there was one frame where you could clearly see Kendrick walking next to Brian Bell. Although Brian Bell had said in an interview that he didn't see Kendrick that day. So he was proven a liar with camera footage.
Mm.
Wild. So, but what is the status quo of this case? Of course, there was a lot going on in all those years. This was 2013. We could speak for hours probably about all the shit that went down. But where is it
Oh,
right now? So after a lot of legal actions by the Kendrick family and counter lawsuits, like people have the balls to counter law, sue them. Crazy. And you can read all of this on the Wikipedia page. I just, in the interest of time of our podcast, I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole of all those lawsuits and So I wanted to spare it here. But anyway, on March 10 in 2021, the case was officially reopened by the Lowndes County Sheriff Ashley Polk. Polk put up a $500,000 reward of his own cash for information leading to the conviction of anyone who killed Kendrick Johnson. According to Polk, he and two other investigators poured through the case for 13 months before coming to this conclusion. In January 2022, the second investigation was closed with no charges filed. Polk released a finding saying there was no homicide, no cover-up, no conspiracy in the January 2013 death of the teen. It was simply a tragic and bizarre accident. Polk stated that he would not be claiming there was something wrong with the original investigation or that the original investigation's conclusion of an accident death was wrong. The sheriff also stated he does not consider the case to be a homicide. He further stated that two brothers named in previous legal actions by the Johnsons are not suspects.
How did he determine that after numerous autopsies, two resulting in the same ending, like same results? Like it just, how do you, how do you learn that this child died from a blunt force trauma to the neck and still consider that an accident?
I don't know.
I just,
This must
I
be,
just,
I mean, I my heart breaks and I'm on the loss of words for this poor family, what they have to go through, right? Like not only did they lose their son, they're also being slapped in the face over and over and over again. And somebody
yep,
thinks they're stupid that they would just go along with this ridiculousness.
nope. I follow his mom, KJ's mom, on TikTok, and still she is advocating to get justice. And I'm like, it's so it's so sad, but like I feel like she's going to continue to do that until she dies,
Yeah,
you know, because I feel like there's just never going to be any justice for this family. And I hope, I hope and pray that they eventually do. But I just, the way that the world is, the way that our system is, like, I, it's so disheartening just to,
yeah,
just because like I just feel like they'll never get it and they deserve it. And it's so frustrating. But,
yeah,
I'm glad, like I said, I don't think she'll ever stop and she shouldn't.
yeah. I admire this family so much for the strength and the courage to put up such a fight. They risked to get arrested themselves, but they put everything they put their lives on the line for justice for their son. And I admire that deeply.
Oh
I,
yeah. I just
like you
I
said,
just imagine myself. Sorry, go ahead.
I want them to find justice and closure. And I want them to be praised for their hard work and their courage and their strength.
Mhm.
I want them to come to this finish line eventually so that they can also rest the case for themselves and just grieve their son without having to fight this unfairness that's happening.
Yeah, I agree. My cousin and I, we always say like if that were us, like the whole city would be burned down. I don't care. Like as long as you're getting justice for my son or family member or whatever. If that were us and shit wasn't getting done, like this case, I don't blame them for everything that they're doing. Like do more.
Yeah. What do you think would have happened if the Bell brothers weren't white? If they were black guys?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I
Well,
don't
what would have
I don't
happened if Kendrick was also white?
I think if Kendrick was white and his murderers were white, I think the case would be solved already. I think if Kendrick was white and his murderers were black, the case would be solved. I don't know. I don't know if both parties were black that they would even I don't know. I don't know. That's a very good question, and I don't know how to answer that. I
Mm.
don't know. He stumped me.
Yeah. You know what I just can't get over is the fact that every step of the way was an alleged theoretical cover up. I don't know how else to say it, but
Mhm.
in my opinion,
Yeah.
there was a cover up. How does this happen? Like, what kind of network must be like the machinery behind it?
I don't know, and I'm like, I truly think this was fueled by racism, 100%. I just think they thought, "Okay, just another black kid, like, whatever." Or again, the connections that the alleged family has to the FBI. Um, I mean, even the paramedics, their report says they, you know, they walked in and were surprised that the scene wasn't taped off because they questioned the police and were like, why aren't you investigating this? Why aren't you treating this like a homicide? We have suspicion that there's foul play and this should be looked at as a homicide. The police were like, nope, we think it's an accident and moved on. Same thing with the medical examiner. He said after the 6 hours that it took so long for him to be contacted, that scene was compromised. He works for the county. So, like, the fact that he's even saying that was very shocking. But I'm like, I just, from the very beginning, it was compromised and most likely a cover up.
Yeah. What do you think what happened to the organs?
I think that now, like I said, I think with the medical examiner speaking out on the county, I was very shocked about. I don't know if he necessarily was still, a part of that group though. Like, I don't know if his office had something to do with the organs missing or, in transportation to the or to the funeral home. I think they were purposely removed
Mhm.
because, testing the liver and everything, all the organs like that, they're crucial keys to, you know, determining the manner of death, the call or the time of death, all of that.
Yeah.
So I think they were 100% destroyed.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the funeral home though.
I agree with
I
you.
don't.
And that's, I think, also the theory the independent guy who did the autopsy for the family had. I believe in the documentary, he said that he believed that Kendrick was beaten up and kicked to the stomach so hardly that probably the organ showed signs of that. Like, I don't know if
Yeah,
they were deformed or ripped or whatever. And that's why they removed and destroyed the organs so that just to get rid of this evidence, pretty much.
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the one detail that bothers you the most about this case?
Hmm. I can't point just one because I feel like there's just so many that, you know, I don't know.
Okay.
I think just the way that the scene was handled and it was automatically treated like an accident. My theory would be, start at the biggest crime and then breaking it down to the
Hmm.
smallest. I just wish they treated it like a true crime and did
Yeah.
their due diligence because his family would have answers that they deserve.
Yeah. I agree with you. And do you have any other important details that bother you still to this day that I didn't mention in my recap?
So there's a few things that I wanted to talk about. So with the second autopsy findings, the medical examiner found that there was like a motion almost as if there was like a karate chop to his neck. And
Mhm.
now it might not have been from a hand, more so from an object, and that hit his carotid. And then they said, like, most likely as soon as you hit that carotid, because it's such a big artery, that he was immediately deceased.
Mm.
There was another tip after that email that someone said that they knew who did this, and they hit him in the neck with a 45-pound weight.
Oh, wow.
So that, I guess, would make the most sense for that, hit to the neck. Um, and then kind of going back to him being in the mat with the 14-inch mat and his shoulders being 19 inches, like, the math just isn't mathing. It just
Mhm.
does not make sense. So, in my opinion, I think he was either deceased or unconscious by the time he was placed in that mat, because there's just no way that they would be able to put him in that mat. Like, if he was fully conscious, fully aware of what was going on,
Yeah.
unless he was injured, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
or
And
already
honestly,
deceased.
I'm sorry. Honestly, I believe they probably didn't even stick him in the mat. They probably rolled him in the mat, laying down, and then put the
Yeah.
mat on.
Yeah. That's what I think as well. Because I also read somewhere that, like, you don't have to just necessarily be alive for your fluids to come out like that. Like, he could already have been deceased at that point.
Yeah.
So, even though that happened, like, he could have already been deceased. But I think, yeah, I think he was already gone by the time he was literally probably shoved in that mat, like, smushed up in that, like, just the fact that, like, his shoulders were literally bigger than the mats themselves. How is that
Yeah.
possible? Like, you had
Yeah.
to have, mm,
Yeah.
it's just sickening.
Yeah. I believe it was that too, because as you say, if they hit him with something in the neck area that immediately killed him, that he must have been dead, and they tried to cover it up by rolling him
Right.
in the mats.
Yeah. And then placing a shoe, like, under him. Like, how is that even possible?
I honestly
And then,
believe that whoever killed him did not place the shoe. I think the shoe placement was part of the cover up once the body was
right.
found.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a part of the cover up. Same thing with the footage. When it was sent to, I can't remember who it was sent to. I want to say it was CNN or maybe another party, but they said that when the police sent the video footage over, that they could tell that it was edited so that they could, that it was almost like a blurriness was over the footage.
Hmm.
So it was even more compromised. So not
Yeah,
only is the footage blurry, but now you're having the missing footage. So definitely seems like a cover up to me.
definitely. Yeah.
I mean, I could honestly talk about this case. I'm still like, my blood is still boiling. Like, I think I can go on and on, but I feel like I'll be leading with emotion and not making much
Yeah.
sense. So,
Yeah. I totally feel that since I just watched the documentary yesterday and got into the details of the case, I feel like I'm still in some sort of a state of shock. Like I
hmm,
can't even believe that. It's insane.
yeah.
At what point do you think does a case like this deserve to be reopened or reclassified?
Uh, I mean, he was a child.
Hmm.
So the fact that they're treating this child and not giving him the proper investigation, and then, the family doing their hiring third parties and reopening the autopsy and all that stuff, and then including additional information or actually providing information that wasn't provided in the first autopsy, I think that's when the case should be reopened and reclassified.
I agree. What do you believe needs to change in order for this to happen, that it gets reopened and reclassified?
You're hitting me with some really tough questions today. I mean, I think it ultimately comes down to get over fucking racism. Like, it's 2026. Like, who the fuck cares what we look like, right? Like,
Yeah.
the fact that, like, this case, wasn't performed properly, and this child did not get justice and his family did not get justice, and the fact that this case even happened, get over yourself. Do your job, look out for victims. Like, I just yeah, I don't know. I don't know another answer. I'm sure I could go on and sound more intelligent, but I don't know. I just think it comes down to racism, and just get over your
Mhm.
shit.
Yeah. Do you believe that this was a race inflicted
Yes,
killing?
I do. For 100%. The area is a very high area for racism, and then because Kendrick was black, and then the one tip that came in, it was him hooking up with the brother's girlfriend. I'm sure that played a huge role, but it's like, you're gonna let race and a girl affect your life, like, to the point where you're literally gonna take a life?
Yeah.
It's really it's that's ridiculous.
Yeah. I agree with you. I believe that is this racistic thinking of how can a black guy steal my girlfriend? This is not even a human. He doesn't deserve to live anymore. Like I believe
Right,
that might be a thinking behind it. If he had been a white guy taking his girlfriend, it would have been maybe a bar fight, and next day they
right,
would have been buddies again. But there would have probably, in my opinion, not have been a murder.
right. I think it's, they're high school, so their hormones are all over the place. They have
Yeah,
no logical thinking, like, their frontal lobes aren't fully developed, so they really,
yeah,
like, don't think of their actions, so they were probably in the heat of the moment and committed this crime. But I'm like, "Oh my god, if only you realized, like, you probably weren't even gonna date this girl moving forward, like, was she really worth it?"
yeah,
But, I mean, I guess she was, because they're getting away with it. That's probably the only devil's advocate I will go and say, but it's insane that
yeah.
they let this happen.
Yeah, I agree. That's also the only devil's advocate point I could make is that maybe they just wanted to beat him up and teach him a lesson and accidentally killed him with this one hit to this specific spot and he was immediately dead. And then they panicked and tried to cover it up, right? Like if I wanted to play devil's advocate, but I
Right.
don't, that's honestly the only point I feel like playing devil's advocate I could make, but I also don't believe that's the case. I,
No,
I don't.
no, I don't either.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add before we wrap up this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to close off by saying that, you know, again, this case has, like, really pulled on my heart. Like, it really breaks my heart that we still, to this day, do not have a definite answer, and his family did not get justice. I hope and pray that, again, that they do eventually find answers and get the justice that they deserve, and that KJ can rest in peace. But until then, I'll constantly be sharing the content. I'm gonna um add his mom into the comments so that, like, she can see it, and I'm like, hopefully it reaches, just anyone, any other person, to just get his name constantly out there so that he can get justice.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's exactly the notes I have here for my outro for this episode. I wanted to say Black Lives Matter. Kendrick Johnson's life mattered. I want the family to find the full extent of justice they can get for his murder. I want them to find closure one day. I want them to live a peaceful rest of their lives, not having to fight for justice. I wish them all the strength possible in the world. I send them my prayers, definitely. Maybe I'll even tag the mom if she's online active to show her our support. You know, I also feel like you said, we need to raise more awareness for these cases. We need to come together as a society, use our voices, and help them with this fight. I want them to know they're not alone. You know, I feel like if we come together, we one day might be able to beat racism.
Let's hope.
Yeah. The case was sickening and devastating. And I thank you again for bringing this to my attention and for using our platform here so we can share some awareness and shine some light on this. Thank you so much for suggesting that.
Yeah, of course. It was actually my sister, so I'll give her credit.
Well, thank you for your sister then. And I want to thank you, Bitch Besties, for listening and for watching. As I said at the top of the episode, if you have a case you want us to shine a light on in this format here on our platform, on this section of On the Page of Crime, please let us know. Please DM us. If you have any feedback, any further information, please, you're welcome in my comments. As I said, just be nice, be respectful. Yeah. And Paige, thank you so much again for suggesting this case, for coming on here, for being my co-host. I love you. I can wait for our next case and see you next time. Thanks, Bitch Besties. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Bitch Besties, for listening. Make sure to follow us at the Judgy Bitch Pod. And hey, spread the word. Tell your friends, your ex, your dog walker. We'd love the support. Want to be part of the show? DM us your feedback, hot takes, or unapologetic opinions. We just might read them on air. And don't forget to follow, rate, and review the pod. See you next week. Cheers, bitches.